everybody, Andrew Cuneo here. Today I'm going to dive back into Standard. I've been playing Standard off and on since the bannings, and I've settled on this Esper control deck as something that I like. I've played it with it a fair amount now, and I've been reasonably successful. So I'm going to go over some of the card decisions in it, and then I'll see if I can crack into the top 100 on the arena ladder. I'm pretty close right now. For starters, 1 mana slot, we've got Cut Down. It's obviously the best 1 mana card you can play in Standard at this point. There are some decks where it's not very good against the deck, but there are also a lot of matchups where you really want to have a 1 mana interactive card. If you're playing against Mono Red or like Esper Legends or even the green-white enchantment deck. So it's a pretty important card. I only have 3 copies because there are some matchups where it's dead. There's lots of interesting stuff going on at 2 mana. So one thing I've got is 2 main deck copies of Sunset Revelry. This is a card that is pretty inconsistent, but it does a few things well. So one, obviously being against aggressive decks like Mono Red, which is pretty popular in the ladder right now. This is just a very effective card. Also, if you're on the play, you can generally cycle it on turn 2 if it's a matchup where you're not really going to want any of the other effects. You just want to get a card out of it. This is definitely one of the cards that you're going to board out a fair amount. This is sort of a hedge card. A lot of the rest of the deck is going to be very good against the slower decks, so I wanted a few cards that were extremely good against the aggressive decks in the main deck, and Sunset Revelry is one of those. Then when I was talking about being better against the slow decks, I do have 2 main deck negates. So one thing that a lot of people do is they play Make Disappear as a 2 mana counter. I don't have that in my deck because this deck tends to play really long games and it doesn't have a ton of ways to make creatures to make Disappear better later on in the game. So I wanted a cheap counter, and I think Negate is the best of the options. I don't think Essence Scatter is a very good option just because I'm playing black, so I can just play the regular creature removal. It's going to be just as good most of the time. Disdainful Stroke's another card I was considering, and I actually played with my main deck for a while, but it just doesn't do anything against Mono Red, and I think Mono Red has gotten popular enough that I don't want to have cards that are really complete blanks against Mono Red in my main deck. 5 2-mana removal spells, so I'm playing 1 Go for the Throat and 4 Sheoldred's Edicts. I've been really impressed with Sheoldred's Edict. In the post-banning world, Planeswalkers are way more popular than they were before the banning, which makes Sheoldred's Edict really nice because a lot of people are going to tend to resolve Planeswalkers, and they're very hard to get off the board if you're just relying on, if your deck is just Go for the Throats and Sweepers, you're going to have a very hard time getting rid of a Planeswalker. But I've got 4 Sheoldred's Edicts that are going to do that for me. Also, it's nice that I don't have a million Go for the Throats in my deck, so I don't get Skrelv locked. When you just play with a ton of Go for the Throats, sometimes they just play a turn 1 Skrelv, and you don't have a cut down. You just have 2 Go for the Throats, and because you can't kill Skrelv with Go for the Throat, you then can't kill any of their other cards with your Go for the Throats either. 2 Siphon Insights. This is in my deck for a couple of reasons. One is it's very good if you play some sort of a mirror-ish matchup, but also this is a deck that wants to make all of its land drops, so having just a cheap card that allows you to go and find lands when you're in spots where you need to make your land drops is pretty important. I'm playing 27 lands in my deck, plus Celestus, plus 2 Siphon Insights. This deck really, if you don't make your first 4 land drops, you're really going to struggle in the game. And you very happily make your first 6 or 7 most of the time. I have 1 Silver Scrutiny in my deck to go with 3 Memory Deluges just for a mix of card drawing. I don't know that there's really that strong of a reason to do this other than every once in a while people play the Stone Brain against me, and it would be kind of annoying if I had 4 Memory Deluges and they just took all Memory Deluges. Also, Silver Scrutiny, if you're playing a matchup where you're comfortable just tapping out, there are going to be times when you play this where X is like 6 or 7, and assuming you then get to untap and start using those cards, you're always going to win. Also, just being able to play this for X is 3 on turn 5, that's usually a spot where you're still hoping to find lands because you still want to be making your land drops, and it's kind of disappointing when you play a 4-mana Memory Deluge and like one of the cards you're taking is a land. You do it if you need the land, but that's a pretty inefficient way to gain advantage if you're not really playing Memory Deluge for like the ability to, really get good selection to find good spells. 3 Dissipates. I think this is the best 3-mana counter, and I actually think this is a pretty good format for Dissipate. There are some pretty annoying things that it's nice to be able to exile. Tenacious Underdog being one of them. Also, some people are going to try to reanimate stuff out of their graveyard, so if you dissipate an Atraxa, you don't need to worry about it coming back somehow. I've had people play Diregraphed Rebirth, which is another, obviously that's a good card to dissipate because you don't have to worry about the flashback. 2 copies of Void Rend. Void Rend is a card that I thought was basically unplayable when Fable of the Mirror Breaker was legal, just because you came out so far behind if their turn 3 play was Fable of the Mirror Breaker and your turn 3 play was Void Rend. It just felt completely awful. But now that there's nothing as efficient as Fable of the Mirror Breaker to play early on in the game, or to play for 3 or less mana, I think some number of Void Rends is acceptable. Also, this is, if we're counting, I now have 6 spells that can get Planeswalkers off the board, which is a pretty big deal. 1 copy of the Celestus. I wanted a little bit more life gain in my deck and, a little bit more mana, but also some filtering so you don't get flooded, because I do have 27 lands in my deck in addition to the Celestus. I think it's worth playing one of these. I don't know that I would want to play more than one, but it's a pretty nice inclusion, I would say. Main way to win with this deck is to kill your opponent with tokens from the Wandering Emperor. I have 4 copies of the Wandering Emperor in my deck. I think it's basically the card that allows this strategy to exist. It's obviously, just a very strong card, especially in a deck that's looking to play at instant speed. And the life gain you get from it is very relevant in a lot of matchups. The exiling is very relevant against stuff like Tenacious Underdog and Razorlash Transmogrant. 3 Memory Deluges. Like I touched on before, I've got kind of a mix of card advantage cards between the Siphon Insight, Silver Scrutiny, and the Memory Deluges. I've got very, very good sweepers, which is another thing that really allows this deck to exist. Sunfall, which you're frequently going to get like a 3-3 or a 4-4 from resolving Sunfall, so that's another way that you can close out a game potentially. In practice, what winds up happening more is like the first incubator token you get, you're just kind of grinding through whatever removal spells your opponent happens to have in their deck. So they're probably going to be able to deal with like the first incubator token, and they're going to be able to deal with the first Wandering Emperor and whatever tokens it made. But you're going to run them out, so eventually you're going to have a Wandering Emperor that just takes over the game. 2 copies of Farewell. It's expensive, but in the matchups where it's good, it is so good. Pretty much every time I play against someone who's playing the green-white enchantments deck and I cast the spell, they just concede. They never play it out from there. Similarly, if you play against like that mono-white control deck, which has really fallen off a lot because that deck isn't very good, their deck is also very bad against Farewell. Looking at the lands, the most interesting thing is I do have 2 copies of Mirrex. This is another way to win a super long game. Eventually you will overwhelm your opponent with Phyrexian Might tokens, assuming you can control the rest of the game. While Mirrex is a good card in this deck, honestly, it's a better card against this deck, and almost every deck that I play against on the ladder has Mirrex in it at this point. It's a pretty obnoxious card to exist. I think I would be happy if it just didn't exist, but it does, so I'm playing with it. It does make you need to be very careful the turn you play this, because you're oftentimes going to want to get the colored mana for double white on a particular turn. That's the most likely way for you to take advantage of this. You can get any colored mana the turn it entered the battlefield is to get double white for a Wandering Emperor, a Sunfall, or a Farewell. Also, sometimes on turn 2, you'll use it to cast a Siphon Insight. But basically, you shouldn't be putting this into play over a different land in your hand unless you're either going to make a token with it, which that's like a really low priority thing to do until very late in the game, or you're getting access, you need it to cast a spell. And remember, it's only on your turn you're going to have any color of mana. So you can use it to play Memory Deluge, but you have to play Memory Deluge on your turn. You can't use it to play Dissipate unless you're fighting a counter battle on your turn, which is very unlikely to happen. Rounding out the rest of the lands, I've obviously got 4 Raffine's Towers. I have 5 of the fast lands because this deck plays really long games and frequently wants to you want to use all of your mana on turn 7. You want an untapped land so you can flashback Memory Deluge. You want an untapped land on turn 6 to play Farewell. So I didn't want to play the full 8 of these because they would, between these and the Raffine's Towers, you're going to have too many lands coming into play tapped on turns like 4, 5, 6, and 7, where it really matters to be able to, have spots where you're going to have untapped lands on at least one of those turns. You want to sequence your lands so you get untapped lands on the turns you need them, which is why there is not a tremendous amount of lands that are going to come into play tapped on those turns. I only have 7 of this style of land. Actually, that's not true. I have 9. I also have 2 Shattered Sanctums. Maybe I could play more of these. I don't. It's a little bit tough because you do want to be able to play your 2 mana spells as well. Basically, the reason not to just max out on these is you want to be able to play Sheoldred's Edict on turn 2 reliably, or Siphon Insight for that matter. And then only 2 pain lands. Having to take damage from your lands is pretty annoying in this deck, but I wanted, in order to get enough colored sources, especially to support playing with 2 Mirrexes, I didn't want to just play more basics. There are 2 basics, an island and a plains. It matters sometimes people are playing enough Field of Ruins that they will get you, but usually the game has gone on, the game gets to a point where you've made enough land drops that it's not that big of a deal if they Field of Ruin you and you can't get a basic. And then all 3 of the special lands. I was considering ditching the Takenuma for a swamp and playing some Obscura storefronts, which I have not tried. I don't think it would be as good as the mix I'm playing right now, but it's something you could conceivably do. Honestly, if you're somebody who's trying to play this deck and you don't have the wild cards to make the whole mana base, I'd be very comfortable ditching Takenuma, 2 Caves of Koilos for like a swamp and 2 Obscura storefronts. Or, if you have Caves of Koilos and you don't have Shattered Sanctums, you mix and match however you see fit. I'm very close to just having Obscura storefront in my deck. So if you're trying to save on wild cards, I would hope not to play a full 4, but I think if you want it with 2 or 3 Obscura storefronts in your deck, that would be fine. Obviously, if you're going to do that, you need to play a few more basic lands. You definitely want to play at least an island, a plains, and a swamp. Moving on to the sideboard, we got some interesting cards here. I have 1 Elspeth Smite in my deck over a 4th cut down. This is because there are times when it's very nice to be able to exile creatures like Phoenix Chick, Tenacious Underdog. Usually I don't board an Elspeth Smite against black decks, but I would do it if we get to game 3 and I know they have a bunch of the Razor Lash Transmogrants and Tenacious Underdog. I wouldn't just board it in the dark, but if you know for certain you have to deal with those threats, Elspeth Smite is a nice additional answer. Obviously, you do have the Wandering Emperors, Sunfall and Farewell, so you've already got access to a lot of exile, but this is a little bit more. Another nice thing about this card is that against mono red, if they play Kamano faces Kakazan on turn 1, a lot of the times you can't even cut down their 2-drop, because if they play like Felden or whatever the 2/2 haste vampire is called, they're just 3/3s automatically, but Elspeth Smite will be able to hit them. 2 Duresses, this is mostly for playing against other blue decks. I do usually board in like 1 against mono red. It's good in a lot of matchups, but mostly versus blue decks. 3 Disdainful Strokes. This is primarily against people who are trying to play some form of an Atraxa deck, which there's a bunch of different ways that people play with Atraxa, but Disdainful Stroke is great against all of them. Another Negate, kind of obviously good in like mirror matches. Also, it's generally very good against people who are trying to play the bigger ramping Atraxa decks. 2 more Siphon Insights. This is specifically to board in against other slow decks. I've tried a couple other cards in this slot. I've tried some of the 3-mana Kaido, and I tried Skrull's Hive for a while. I think just more Siphon Insights is better than playing those other cards. Kaido was pretty underwhelming in the games when you're on the draw, and I feel like Siphon Insight, honestly, if you play anything that's kind of like a mirror, just the person who draws more Siphon Insights is at a huge advantage. 2 more Knockout Blows. In case you haven't noticed, I really wanted to pair against Mono Red. 3rd Void Rend. This is primarily for people who just have a lot of Planeswalkers and you want more answers to Planeswalkers. 2 Depopulates. This is to give you a better sweeper against Mono Red. So against Mono Red, I'm going to swap my Farewells for Depopulates. It's also good against like green-white tokens. I think you should play it against Esper Legends, even though they're going to get a card off of it. I, for a while, had Glistening Deluge in my sideboard in place of this, and that card is obviously really good if you play against green-white, but green-white's not super popular. And I was boarding it in against Esper Legends. It was okay there. It wasn't great. But I think Depopulate just hits more things, and it hits the important matchups that Glistening Deluge doesn't hit. If you wanted to play Glistening Deluge, I mean, your deck's going to be a little bit worse against Mono Red, but I don't think it's a big difference, really. 1 Sheoldred the Apocalypse. This is another card that's mostly good against Mono Red, but just against any sort of aggressive deck. Also, you're boarding it in, so generally they're going to take out some of the removal, so it's just a card that people are going to have a hard time removing in the sideboarding games against you. You could play more copies of it in the sideboard if you're a huge fan of it. It's really up to you. So that's the list. Let's jump into a match, and goal for this video is to finish in the top 100, so hopefully it's going to happen. I probably put a lot of pressure on myself saying I want to finish in the top 100, because basically I think if I lose at any point, it's not going to happen. I forgot this soldier deck existed. It's been so long since I played against it. This is obviously another matchup where Glistening Deluge is really good. Depopulate's going to be good as well. There's pretty much no way I'm getting the card out of this in this situation, so we'll just go for the life and the 1/1s. That's kind of a problem. I'm not sure that Knight Errant of Eos is actually a good card in the soldier deck. Everybody seems to play it, but it's kind of underwhelming for me.
Finally, I'm home.
You just have such good options of like 2 and 3 mana.
I am almost sad to see you go.
It surprises me that people put it in their deck.
I'm never done for good.
I want to make sure I make my land drops. I think I'm just going to Memory Deluge now. I'd like to Farewell next turn. Do I even care about this Siphon Insight? They're all about the free cards. I hope they don't have Make Disappear in their deck. I didn't block there because if I do block there, it prices me into like I have to play. Like it commits me to playing Farewell. I think I still want to play Farewell. Yeah. I think if this doesn't work, if this gets Make Disappeared, I probably lose. But if I wait and I just try to use like Wandering Emperor or Sheoldred, they just get so many free cards that I don't even necessarily win. If I fight through it all. Oh, they could have Zephyr Sentinel. But they appear not to, so that's good. A lot of recruiting going on over there. Oh, they do have Make Disappear in their deck. They must have just drawn that. There's no way they sat on it. This is my third one. Might want to be a little bit careful with this one. Although, when you have Mirrex in your deck, it's really hard for you to run out of damage. Doesn't really happen. They didn't play the Harbin. I was going to say that probably means they have Resolute Reinforcements, but they would have flashed it in response to the Sheoldred's Edict. So they must have Make Disappear in their hand, or they just did something that doesn't make any sense. And they're getting priority. They definitely have Make Disappear. This thing can't target itself, right? It's another target creature you control. Opponent, your Harbin is going to die. So I'm going to go for the, I guess if I go for the Wandering Emperor Ambush, they could have used Fortified Beachhead. Not anymore. Because they cast Thalia first, which I don't know if that made sense or not for them. Alright, in this matchup, I think Sheoldred is good. Doesn't win the game on its own necessarily, but if I can, you know, we use removal spells against the important targets, does a lot. This is a matchup where I like Duress better than counters because they're obviously going to board in like all their Disdainful Strokes, their Make Disappears, that Protect the Negotiators, I think is the name of a card. I don't like having counters in my deck at all against that deck. Don't really love Siphon Insight either. Do I want to have these Farewells in my deck? Or do I want to just, I could play a Siphon Insight and a Farewell. The idea being that, like, this is primarily going to be something I'll be using if I need to find land drops. I don't have any 3-mana double blue cards in my deck. I guess it doesn't matter, I'm still going to play Deserted Beach turn 1 over the Plains. We're gonna have a turn for Sheoldred and see if they came prepared. I think it's better to just jam Sheoldred there rather than playing Memory Deluge and hoping I find something that can deal with the Sky Strike Officer. The Sheoldred does a little bit against the Sky Strike Officer because they do take 2 damage. Oh, that was a good draw. I think I'm going to Void Rend the Sky Strike Officer in their upkeep. Well, now I'm going to do it right now. Because I was worried about Zephyr Sentinel. Obviously, they can draw a card off of the Sky Strike Officer. I thought that was what they were going to do. It was not what they did, though. Are we in trouble if they have a Lord here? That's 6. Oh. Not the prettiest way to do it, but I think it's going to do it. I'm going to press the flop, honestly. This card is so terrible. It honestly amazes me that people play multiple games with it in their deck. I guess I tried it for multiple games because I kept hoping to find something in it, but it's quite bad. It's the only way that it's good is in this very specific circumstance where you just need help against like 6 and 7 mana cards. So I have played it like in the sideboard of non-blue decks where
Now you've done it.
I was really worried about Atraxa or cards like that. But in a white-blue deck, I would never play Invasion of Gobakhan. Won the die roll. Do not like that hand. I wouldn't say I really like this hand all that much either, but if I hit some running lands, it could be fine. This is why I've got Siphon Insight in my deck. Rude. They have a lot of basic lands in their deck. Maybe they're playing actually. Maybe they're not really playing Esper. Maybe they're just playing white-blue. Playing some sort of control deck. I think it's just all basic lands. I would like one of those basic lands, please. Cards that they have in their hand? 7. I have 7 as well. New card for me, please. They could have cast Make Disappear on that, and even if I had paid, it would have done nothing. They didn't do that though. So they must, their mana base must be the way it is because of Lay Down Arms. That's got to be what's going on here. Don't really want to run this Silver Scrutiny into a Make Disappear. Well, that's another reason to have their mana base be the way it is. I thought about playing with Thirst for Discovery. It's not a bad idea. I think that it's hard to put all of the kind of cards I would want into a deck without playing 3 colors. Which makes it, I don't think you can really play 3 colors with enough basics to make Thirst for Discovery make sense. So you'd really want to be a 2-color deck, which... They may just be a blue-white deck that has this in because it cycles. Does that make sense? Oh, it's a plains for Lay Down Arms. I guess that makes it make more sense. Can I deck them? Have I decked them yet? Seems like it should be a pretty good matchup for me. This game obviously hasn't started great, but I haven't lost yet. I feel like I'm a little behind, but not so badly that I can't come back. Especially on the power of the back of drawing Mirrex. The Ambitious Farmhand's a little bit annoying because it means that they can make disappear the Silver Scrutiny pretty easily. Or, I guess I need 1 more land and then I can do it for 3 at the end of their turn. I don't really want to let that be in play. How many cards they have? 8. It's all farmhands. They discarded and make disappear. Nice. I was about to... I was going to farewell just to get the Memory Deluge out of their graveyard. And I guess I'll Sunfall instead, because I drew an untapped 9th land. So they can't make disappear this. And I can afford to make a Mirrex token at the end of their turn. I'll pay. They're almost definitely going to resolve some sort of big planeswalker, I would think. I just have to hope that it's not that bad for me. I'll probably just main phase big Silver Scrutiny. We've gone through 3 copies of Make Disappear. Ooh, didn't even do anything. I like that. They have their 4th Make Disappear, and they had a Wandering Emperor. Yuck. Oh. They don't have a Make Disappear, though. Okay. Still get the 2/2. I might not have done this, but I have a Void Rend, so if they play another Planeswalker, I can Void Rend it.
The entire multiverse is at stake. It's nice to see a familiar face.
It's a lot of Planeswalkers.
This is our enemy.
They can kill my token. They didn't. That was a mistake.
We can win this together.
That was a pretty bad mistake. I should have just plussed on the incubator token.
Just keeps getting worse.
So if they're playing Thirst for Discovery and all these basics, they probably don't have any Mirrexes, or they may have like 1 Mirrex. That's a really big advantage for me. Just gonna chill out. Leave up mana for my Dissipates. And to cycle Raffine's Tower. And maybe cast Wandering Emperor. See what they do with their turn. Well, they saw the writing on the wall. They were gonna lose from that point. Pretty much guaranteed. Alright, so I got a lot of great options here. I think I went Disdainful Strokes, Negate, Duress, Void Rend, Siphon Insight. Sheoldred is a maybe. I definitely don't want the cut downs. I mean, they had all those ambitious farmhands, but they didn't really have anything else. Don't want those. Don't think I want any of that stuff. So the question is, do I want a Sheoldred or a cut down? Because cut down does help you sometimes if you're in like a Wandering Emperor on Wandering Emperor battle. I think it's probably better than Sheoldred. Just because it's 1 mana. There'll almost definitely be a target for it at some point in the game. It's perfectly reasonable hand. I guess I could draw a Negate, and I might want to be able to cast. It's my 2 mana. I'm not going to Edict this thing. I think I'll just let it hit me for a while. Maybe I don't want to let 2 of them just pound away on me, though. You win. You got a spell out of an ambitious farmhand. At least they didn't play Wedding Announcement that turn, though. That would have been real bad for me. Very not conducive to my long-term health. I'm gonna jam Wandering Emperor as long as they don't play something I have to counter. Ooh. That's a problem. Hopefully they don't do anything. And I get to Eiganjo, the Chrome Host Sea Shark. I'm not going to get to Eiganjo it. That's bad. This isn't looking very good for me. I guess I need to do this. I'm just going to die to the incubator tokens almost definitely. I don't even have a second blue mana. I don't have any sweepers left on my deck. And Wandering Emperor got countered. These are all things that are bad. I think we're in the realm of like either draw a Wandering Emperor right away or just pray to draw a Siphon Insight and have it find a sweeper. Neither one of those happened. Alright, if they're doing the Seed Shark stuff, I'll play with one Farewell in my deck. Give me some way to come back from that. I do have a decent number of cards that can just kill the Chrome Host Sea Shark, like the Void Rends and the Go for the Throat. Didn't draw them that game. Come on, land. On land. Being overrun by these ambitious farmhands.
Run away. You'll be saying guards to me. Still have much to learn.
Stuff like this does happen when you put Mirrexes in your 3-color deck that's playing pretty heavy mana requirements of all colors. Can you imagine? Well, can you believe how much that I wish I had drawn the Siphon Insight this game? Wish I could play more than 4 copies of it. It's like my ambitious farmhand. I feel like there's a decent chance I want to Disdainful Stroke something this turn cycle. So I didn't want to play Sheoldred's Edict there, even though I'm probably going to have to Edict one of the farmhands. I don't have to do it right this second, though. I'm so jealous there's so many lands. At least I don't have the Wandering Emperor. I guess if they had the Wandering Emperor, I can Void Rend the token and just kill it with mites. Okay, starting to get something going on. It's always a tough decision whether to make a Mite or to, you know, cast a spell like Memory Deluge. Usually you want to cast a spell like Memory Deluge, but this is a situation where I think it's more important to make the Mites because I'm actually pretty close to killing them. Like if I make a Mite this turn, they're going to have to resolve something that deals with the board or they're going to die in 3 turns again. Are you going to negate that just to make it 2/2? Oh, Mirrex of their own. I'm going to Void Rend this now. The other option is to attack into it, and when they activate it, Void Rend it, and then they wouldn't be able to afford to play the flashback cost on Memory Deluge, but I think it's more important for me to use my 3 mana. Wandering Emperor and my Eiganjo. Okay. Still in a lot of trouble. That was bad. I should have just made a token. I was thinking that they can't play Make Disappear, but if they had just played Negate there, it would have been real bad for me. I want to cast Duress to get a potential answer to the Mite token out of their hand. And I want to be able to make a Mite. That's why I took land Duress there. No. Probably are doomed. It was a hard-fought battle. All right, I think that I'm going to call it a video there. I hit my goal of making the top 100. Only took 2 matches. Thanks for everybody who watched this. If you haven't already, please sub to the channel, and I will see you next time.